All right. Welcome to the Around the Ballpark podcast, episode number 96. It just hit me the other day. I've been doing this for a while, Darren, but that 100 number is right around the corner. So
yes, super exciting. Is.
But I am so glad to be back with you. I know we mentioned off air that it's just kind of been myself and different co-hosts each of the last couple of weeks. So I'm glad that we're back together. The gang's all here.
I'm just so happy that they dropped the charges, so they'll release me. I mean, the ankle bracelet, it's so what? But
well, you're coming to us live from an undisclosed location.
Yeah, that's right.
Some penitentiary somewhere. I appreciate it. But
Attica.
Well, we are so grateful to have Kevin with us, and we're going to get to know Kevin in just a few moments and what we're going to talk about. But he is our special guest this evening from Belly Up Sports, and so we'll get to know him. But before we do, as we always do, we want to give a shout out first and foremost to our sponsors over at Nashville Tax Solutions.
Palm Bay, Fort Pierce, are tax problems weighing you down? Are you behind on your filings? Are you facing a lien? Nashville Tax Solutions here to help with the expertise and dedication that you need. Their experienced team handles the IRS, so you do not have to. But don't just hear from us. Clients do say it best, such as Chris Bennett and his team turned a nightmare into peace of mind. They're confident, they're sharp, they're honest, and they truly care. So don't let tax stress take over your life. Call 855-627-4829 and visit NashvilleTaxSolutions.com or email info@NashvilleTaxSolutions.com today. Nashville Tax Solutions, real help and real results.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you, of course, as always, to Nashville Tax Solutions for all that you do for the community. And I'm so excited that you now have the 2 locations in Central Florida. That's outstanding. And so we just want to thank you for believing in us from day one. Under 100 subscribers, you partnered, locked arms with us from the very start. So we're forever grateful for you. Even helped out at the Christmas extravaganza event. So huge shout out to you guys. So thanks, and I'm sure you're probably watching as well. So tonight we want to honor our very special guest, Kevin from Belly Up Sports. And so, Kevin, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and where we can find you I've already been following for quite a while now, but where others can find you on your social media.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm a part of the Belly Up Sports Network. I'm the senior guy in age and also how long I've been with the company. And I cover all kinds of sports. I'm really big on fantasy. And you can find me on the Belly Up Sports YouTube page, which on Sunday nights I'm a co-host on the Belly Up Fantasy Baseball Show. On Tuesday nights, we have the Belly Up Football Fantasy Show. Then on Saturday mornings, I'm a guest on the No Credentials Required show for the summer. I'm talking baseball over there. Then on Friday nights, there are 3 of us in the corporation, might be hard to believe, that are Seahawks fans. And so we do a Seahawks session show that we've done a couple of times, but we're going to start doing that tomorrow, every Friday night during football season. And that's all on the YouTube page. If you go to the Belly Up website, then you'll find articles from me. Right now, we are right knee-deep in fantasy football. I've got articles on there. I dropped one just the other day on wide receivers, and I've got one coming out on tight ends. We've covered Dynasty. Now we're doing redraft. And so I'm really busy covering a lot of different things, and I just appreciate you guys asking me on the show tonight.
Yeah, sounds like you have a full slate. That's awesome. So I wanted to just give you a quick 30-second kind of background how this whole Around the Ballpark came together. And then, Darren, if you wouldn't mind, maybe you can kind of reach out with the first question for the podcast tonight. But so when we first created this, it was more of a, let's talk baseball all the time. And to an extent, we do talk primarily baseball on the show. But the title of our podcast, Around the Ballpark, basically means on the way to the ballpark. We like to talk about other things along the way. We don't just talk just baseball on the way there. So you'll see from time to time, we have specialty episodes, and we are going to talk some baseball tonight. But you might see some other episodes in the past covering some WWE. We've had a pastor on before. We've had a haunt season stuff on before. So although we're primarily baseball, we do realize that road trips other stuff gets talked about. So that's kind of how this whole name came together, and I love it, and it's beyond expectations. And so just wanted to get that out there. So Darren, I know we have a lot of fun little topics to chat about tonight, and if you're here, let us know in the chat that you're here. I see several of you guys on both X and YouTube, so let us know you're here. But Darren, go ahead, and what do you want to talk about first?
So I have a out of the blue kind of question for you, Kevin.
Okay.
I lived out west for 16 years. Specifically, I lived in Fresno. I covered sports over there as well. And people don't realize about Seattle. It is a wonderful, wonderful sports mecca. And I use that term endearingly, where you have the Seahawks, you have the Mariners, but you got teams like, when you play Portland in soccer, I mean, it's a derby. I mean, people really care. The Kraken, wonderful place for talk a little bit about sports and what they mean to the people in Seattle. It's just a wonderful environment to be in, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I've never actually lived in Seattle. I've been there on a few occasions. I was in the Navy, and
thank you for your service, by the way.
I appreciate that. And I was on the carrier Constellation, and it was in the yards up there, Puget Sound. And so for a whole summer, I spent that up there and got to know the city very well. And just when you want, I know it's been a lot of years now, but if you sat there and watch the Supersonics game, you could tell right there. And they had one of the, if not the greatest intros to a game ever.
And by the way, a great logo.
A great logo. So I really love how that city is behind their sports teams. And I've been up, like I said, I've been up there. I've been to some Mariner games when they were in the Kingdome.
Right.
And I've been to the Seattle Seahawks. Unfortunately, Lumen Field did not exist at that time, but I went and saw them play at Husky Stadium.
Yes.
And that's one of the great places, if you ever get a chance to watch a sporting event at Husky Stadium, don't turn that away, because that lake and everything else that's up there is a great place to watch a football game or anything else they've got going on in there. So,
and by the way, people, you see, I got my college shirt on right now. One of the best undervalued uniforms ever are Husky uniforms. Those uniforms rock. They really do.
They do.
You know, but yep. So anyway, here's what I want to ask. How did you become a Seahawk fan? And walk me through that.
Okay, so this is one of the interesting stories, and I've told this story many times. And when I was in my teens, and we were in California, and I went into the sports memorabilia place, and they had a bunch of helmets. You know how they hang up, around the store or whatever. And one of them was a Seahawk helmet, and I'd never seen a Seahawk. I didn't know what that even was. And I asked the guy, "What team is that?" And they said, "Well, that's the Seattle Seahawks." And I thought that helmet was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And ever since then, I've been a fan of the Seahawks. And I have to, they won a Super Bowl and everything else, but that was not easy because they were awful in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that logo. I wish they'd go back to it. That retro uniform is one of the great uniforms ever in professional football.
So good.
It is so good. And so it was the helmets that won me over to the Seahawks. And I've been a fan forever since then.
Yeah, it's not the first time I've heard that. Those helmets, I remember getting when I would collect different helmets that you'd spend 25 cents and you'd get it out of the little machine or whatever. And I remember getting that Seahawk. I'm like, wow, if I didn't already have a team, this would be the way to go. Just from the.
Why don't you share with Kevin who your team is? I mean, I'm a ridiculous Jet fan, so I get no quarter. Tell him what team you like. We talk about struggling teams. Hold on, listen to Mike's team. Jet fan struggles. Seahawks at least won a Super Bowl. Your team is?
Well,
go ahead.
Mine is the Carolina Panthers.
Okay.
I can't, but
Okay.
I have petitioned. One of the things we talked about once on the podcast before was like, I'm a Met fan through and through forever. Darren is as well. Today was a rough day for us, but with the Panthers, it was like, okay, I've got it. Enough time has passed. Can I move on to team number 2 now? Am I stuck with them for life? Is this a really bad decision? I'm going to stick with them. I picked them at a very young age. I like their colors, and I was just feeling the players that they had at the time and the Jake Delhomme era and all that kind of stuff.
They went to the Super Bowl. I don't blame you.
Yeah. So, but it's been a rough decade. I would say.
I was drinking Tang when the Jets went to the Super Bowl.
Oh gosh. And we have a actually, you know what? We have a question in the chat that we were going to kind of get to anyway, so we might as well ask it now that the intelligent people in the chat there. So it has been asked for who would be your Mount Rushmore for the Seattle Seahawks. So if you had to off the cuff, there are no wrong answers there.
Okay. Well, one of them, of course, would have to be a certain Hall of Fame wide receiver who was the very first pick when they were coming to a team. I don't know how the Houston Oilers let that guy get away, but they did. And he wound up being a Hall of Fame wide receiver. So he's got to be number 1. I would put Cortez Kennedy on there. I would put Russell Wilson, not just because his last name's Wilson, but he led him to a Super Bowl. And 4, I guess I would have to go with Beast Mode, Marshawn Lynch, because he delivered one of the greatest plays in the history of football. And that was, the Beast Quake. Mm-hmm. And so I know I'm leaving off some Hall of Famers that Seattle's had, like Walter Jones and guys like that. But those would be the ones I'd put on my Mount Rushmore.
On your Mount Rushmore. Oh, we have a sports fan 654 says, I love those picks. So, okay. Awesome. Okay. That's good positivity in the chat. I love it.
Okay.
Now, did you get, I know you haven't lived in Seattle, but have you got an opportunity to visit the Lumen Field there in Seattle, or?
I have not, because they were building it, like I said, and it's been years since I've been to Seattle.
Okay.
And so all that was available, like I said, was Husky Stadium.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that's the only place I've seen in Seattle. I've seen the Seahawks play in San Diego at the Chargers home field, but that's the only place I've seen them play up in Seattle.
Oh, there's so much I want to unpack there, and we will.
Okay.
I love you. I love you 4. Mine would be a smidge different.
Okay.
Even though Russell Wilson won the Super Bowl, and I like him very much, I'm a Jim Craig guy. He was the one throwing the ball to Steve Largent.
That's right. He sure was.
And, they had nobody around them. They were them too. And let's try to hopefully outscore. And there was just a lot of fun to watch. And that means no disrespect at all to Russell Wilson. And I used to like Kurt Warner, right? He was a very good running back, for not Kurt Warner kids from the Rams.
No, I know who you're speaking of.
No, I know you do, but there's a lot of people that are going, he played for the Rams. No, not the same guy. CURT,
Yes.
I would pick him. But Cortez Kennedy is one of those studs that people, don't realize. And then this might sound weird. When you grew up, you had the Jets, but if you were a Jet fan, you had to like another team that would actually won games. So I was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And I always liked Seattle. Why? Because one of my favorite Steelers, and you probably know who this is, Kevin, had a cup of coffee well past his prime.
Yes.
Seattle. Do you remember who that was?
I do.
Yeah. Most people don't realize Franco Harris
That's
played
right.
for Seattle.
So did Jerry Rice, by the way.
That's right. Yes. They wheeled him out, dusted him off.
That's right.
See, I get so many questions I want to ask you before I go to the San Diego thing, where, by the way, the Rams should still be. I mean, the Chargers.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest travesties in the history of sports.
Yep.
that happened, and they're still San Diego Chargers as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, 100%. I agree with you 1,000%. And I call them the Rams because basically they wear the same uniforms. It's really they've lost their identity up in
They
LA. They
have.
belong in San Diego. I mean, Lance Allworth is just spinning right now. But I wanted to ask you about this. I have a real good friend of mine out in California, Vietnam vet. And don't get me wrong, he got you guys got the Super Bowl. But that decision to throw at the end of the game against the Patriots.
Oh my goodness!
Walk me through your feelings on that, because seriously, I've never forgiven Pete Carroll for that.
I have not either, and it's kind of interesting because the year before that is the greatest football game I've ever experienced because they blew the doors off of Denver.
Yep.
From start to finish, I was able to enjoy the whole game because I knew who was going to win. So then we go to the next game, against the Patriots, much better football game, obviously, and everything. And we're right down there. I've got my Seahawks jersey on, and it's third down. I'm like, okay. And there's 20 seconds, I believe it was, to go. And all of a sudden, there he is going back to pass, and interception at the goal line. And I just talked about Russell Wilson, but he threw that ball to the wrong shoulder. Yes, first of all, he should have thrown it to the other one. He might have knocked it down, but it wouldn't have been intercepted. But once it was, and my wife is standing right over there, and she can verify that the jersey came off of me and was thrown onto the floor. And I was, I'd like to be a calm guy, but my language was not very nice.
A little salty. Point. A little salty.
A little salty. And right after the game was over, my mom called, and I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Right.
I was in no mood to talk to anybody. The jersey sat on the floor for the longest time, and I still don't understand the call.
I don't either. Yeah, beast mode in the backfield. I don't know. Was he trying to not let beast mode get glory? I don't know what it was about. But I forever, Pete Carroll, you screwed up USC and you screwed the Super Bowl for my friend, my Vietnam veteran friend, and I will never forgive him.
Oh, we have royalty here in the chat. One of our favorite people, Tony Voda, says that meltdown reminds me of what I've seen from the Vikings fans here in Minnesota. At least you have one Lombardi.
Yeah, I could certainly I can get behind that because I remember watching how he'd kicked like 50 field goals or something that year. Hit every single one of them until that day.
Yep.
And
the Falcons had no business getting that Super Bowl. That was a Viking year.
No, they sure didn't. And but you know what? As much as we love sports, that's part of the whole deal.
It is.
You want to go like this, but most of the time your heart gets ripped out of your chest, and and you got somebody that's trying to stomp on it before you can get it back in there and grasp some kind of breath, and that's just how things go. But at least that was an honest miss, like you're saying. The pass, if he wanted Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson could run it in.
Yes.
If that's what they want. If they wanted, I don't think that's true that they wanted to give the praise to Russell Wilson. Mm-hmm. But if it was, let him, fake the handoff and try and get it into the end zone off to the far corner.
Yeah, I mean,
but they didn't do that.
Nope.
They didn't. And so
you can do a fade so it gets bounced down. I mean, I played college ball, so trust me, I coached in college, and it just bothered me so much. To me, if I can be serious for a moment, it was somebody whose hubris cost his team the Super Bowl.
Yep.
I agree with that. Like I said, everybody kind of let Russell Wilson off the hook because it was only his second year. No, it was third year by then. But still, a third-year quarterback needs to know what shoulder to throw that ball to, and they kind of let him off the hook a little bit. Mm-hmm. And they shouldn't have. because
No,
he should have thrown a better ball if they were going to pass it, which of course they did.
right.
You got to throw a better pass than that.
You do. And
I
so,
just don't know how you run that play either. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say that. How do you run that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a mystery that will never get solved.
And we have Tony had asked, how do you feel about or having Sam Darnold now? Speaking of Vikings.
Okay, so I liked Smith. Except that he threw like 27 interceptions, it seemed like, in the end zone. And so that wasn't good. But beyond that, I liked what he was doing. And all of a sudden, the Seahawks, they trade Smith. Then they trade Metcalf. And they let, the wide receiver that's been there every single time they've needed a guy, which I understand he's a little bit older and everything. And I'm like, you won 10 games. What are we doing here?
right.
And then they brought in Darnold, which, except for 2 games, was absolutely awesome. So I think that he can do that. They worked on their offensive line. I like that. And they signed Cooper Kupp, which I think the Rams are going to pay for that.
Oh, 100%.
Because he's going to, at least for 2 games, is what I want to pay them back, because they just let him go. There was just, no thank you, no, smooch at the door or anything like that. And he's going to want to show the Rams they made a huge mistake. So I think that's going to work out. And so I think I like the change because he's younger, of course, and he's motivated. And I think he's at the very worst, he's going to be fine. And if he's not, it's a 1-year deal that's guaranteed, so they can cut bait if they need to, and then turn around and go with maybe Justin Milroe in a few years. So I overall, at first I was like I said, what are you doing? Why are you tearing this team apart when you won 10 games? But then they made the moves they made. I am big time on what they're doing, and this respect. I saw this one thing that said that the Seahawks might go winless. And I'm like, what in the world are you talking about right now? And so
that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
What we do in terms of posting online and some of the things, I mean, and I wanted to get into that with you a little bit. I don't want to get ahead of my own coverage here, but there's so much nonsensical talking head clickbait out there.
There is, and my friend that I've known for many years has said that to me. That a lot of the articles he reads it's nonsense.
Yeah,
it's absolute.
I think
nonsense.
some people need their enter keys and space bars taken off their computer keyboards.
Right, and they put together a headline. That you got to read the story, but the headline has no connection to the story.
Right,
and even if it did, it's just massive speculation. And I've always tried to I stay away from that kind of hubris. Right. It doesn't add anything. And I just do my analysis and I go with that and let it stand. And sometimes I've made some horrible calls, as we all do that are in the prediction business.
Yep.
And sometimes, most of the time, my calls have proven to be correct, but sometimes they've gone absolutely awry. But I don't try and get people just to read my story so that they can I can get clicks or whatever else. And I try to help people and give them the information I think people are looking for. So hopefully that's what I do. And when I'm wrong, especially on Reddit, I don't know if you guys are on Reddit a lot. Mm-hmm. And there are some people that will absolutely let you know when you are in the wrong. So,
So
that's okay.
I wanted to mention here, as Tony commented here, clickbait combined with more and more AI, it's going to be bleak for sifting through news, which is true. But reason I want to mention, Tony, I see right behind you there, I see Dodgers on there. So I want to talk a little bit of Dodgers here. And so fun fact about Road Tripper is he was the first person a few years back. He went to the Boston Marathon game in Boston, went to the 11 o'clock start, and then left that game, took a flight that he had already prepaid for over to Dodgers Stadium to see a Dodgers game that evening, and got there. I think it was the third inning or so, and saw that game. So talk about anxiety, like you're trying to accomplish this really cool task, but you're on the plane. You're not sure if it's going to make it there on time and all that stuff. So it wound up working out. So I remember asking you, what's next? How do you kind of top that? It's kind of hard to go coast to coast like that. So I'm sure you were wiped out for a little bit after that. So want to mention that. But so I wanted to ask about the Dodgers, a couple questions. So right now, obviously, they're in the midst of a 6-game losing streak. So we all understand every single team, no matter who you are, it's going to happen to the Tigers here at some point too, I'm sure. You're going to have these little skids here. So I'm really not too worried about them losing 6 games. But what I am not worried about, but what I would like to ask you is, what would you do in terms of Shohei Ohtani the rest of the way, in terms of kind of, we're in an age where we limit our innings way too much and stuff, but for him, obviously it makes sense. But how would you kind of monitor him along the way? I've seen things where he's an opener, seen things where he would, come out of the bullpen, like it's all over the place. So wanted to get your opinion, Kevin, and then Darren, same question as well.
What I would do is, I think they've got pretty much the right idea right now. Have him go out there and just give him a couple of innings, maybe expand on that a little bit, and just see how he is, because the hitting part of this aspect with him is the important part of it, and I wouldn't let the pitching part get in the way of that at all. But if he can pitch a couple, 3-4 innings, and then just hit the rest of the way, I think the Dodgers will be happy with that. With all the injuries that they've had in their pitching staff, I think that works out well. Any innings that he can give them will be a positive net gain for them.
Yeah, I think so. And Darren, you have difference of opinion?
No, I totally agree. The only thing that I would do, and I don't want to, again, sound like out of the box, is, listen, he is your franchise. That doesn't mean that they can't win a World Series without him. They could. They're that deep. But I'll show my age here. If you remember what the Mets did in 1986, Sid Fernandez was not a starter, but he came in the middle innings to shut people down. I could see right now Ohtani pitching 2, 3, 4 innings as a starter, opener, you call it what you want. But boy, I could see him shutting people down in that 3rd to 7th inning. The second, third time in the lineup, he is filthy. And he comes in and does that, and he plays the whole game. That's what I would be doing with him big time. Listen, he's already getting a lot of money and worth every dime of it. So I don't think he is going to object to that. But that's what I would do. You can't stop him.
Let me amend my answer just a little bit. A lot of this depends, because Tanner Scott has looked absolutely awful. He lost the game yesterday. And if he's not gotten himself together as the closer, maybe that's something that you look at as far as Ohtani's concerned.
True.
But I don't think we're there yet. But there's been a couple occasions where Tanner Scott, and I liked him going into the season, and I thought it was interesting how everybody, freaked out because they signed Tanner Scott, but he was a free agent for months, and nobody gave him a offer.
Right.
But and he's looked great, but like I said, he needs to keep that going. And yesterday it didn't look good, and so he needs to get back on board.
True. Very true. And, Mike, I don't think you've been to Dodger Stadium yet. We've talked about it. That place, 3rd oldest ballpark in the major leagues. It's only around since 63, which is not that long ago. But I got to tell you, you walk into that place, you still hear Vince Scully's vibe, his voice, and that place looks like immaculate. It is gorgeous.
That's awesome. And I just want to make mention, I saw in the chat here from Road Tripper, mentions that, or the Soup mentioned he was a Cubs fan, and then Road Tripper mentioned that Pete Crow Armstrong went off today. I hope he's going to be good for a long time. And that's a touchy subject. We all remember this, right? Back in the day. I mean, as a reminder, Javier Baez, also an all-star, but he's not on the Mets either. So there's that. So, I mean, I'm happy that he's doing well, but as a Mets fan,
he's a great player to watch. He's a great player to watch.
Yeah, that's one of those where it's like a fork to the stomach. So,
yeah.
And every team has made mistakes, even the Dodgers. I think them, trading Ryan Pepio to the Tampa Bay Rays or a pitcher who has been hurt every single year, probably not the way to go.
No, it's not the way to go. But I'm glad to see he's doing so well. And fortunately, the Mets dropped both games today of the doubleheader to Baltimore. I was not happy. So, Kevin, we have to drop Paddington for some reason.
Okay, I get that.
Every once in a while in these lives, just he always has the right things.
I get that.
Kevin, I got a question for you. As a Met fan, and talk about the Dodgers. Mike Piazza and the Dodgers. What happened there? He should have been a Dodger his whole career.
He should have been, and it was just all of a sudden he got traded in the middle of the season. He went to Florida of all places, and maybe it was just one of those. The story goes that he was drafted because his father and Tommy Lasorda were friends, or he was the godfather somehow, somewhere in there. And so I don't know if that's true, but that's the kind of the story that I heard. And they drafted Piazza really, really late, but then he, of course, blew the doors off. And this was back in, because you remember the Dodgers weren't that good in the 90s. They weren't. And they didn't want to spend money. It's not like it is now, where they've won the division every year or almost since, the last, 13 years, whatever it is. They were awful in the 90s. They didn't want to spend money. Their owner was one step away from bankruptcy. And so that's how I think that happened. They just didn't want to pay him. And so they sent him to Florida. And then, of course, Florida sent him up to the Mets, where you guys got to enjoy him.
Yep.
But in my mind, he's always a Dodger.
Yeah, I look at him, and I'm a big time Met fan. Our father was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, and then became a Met fan. I look at him as a blend. He is. You can't be wrong. If you think he's a Dodger, he's a Dodger. You think he's a Met, he's a Met. I think we can all agree that he's not a Marlin and he's not a Padre.
I agree. And before I want to jump into I want to talk a little bit of the Utah Jazz here in just a moment, but just this last question in regards to the Dodgers says Jeff Passan put out a scoop. The Dodgers interested in Duran from the Twins. Road Tripper is a Twins fan. Do you think this would be a big way to stop the bleeding? I did see Sports Fan did think that would be a great fit, so I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it's interesting. The Twins are an interesting team to me, because here we are, in 2 years in a row, they have won, 11 straight or more. 2 years in a row, and it hasn't mattered one iota. And the Minnesota Twins are falling completely apart, and they need to come to a place where, this isn't going to work this year. I thought a lot more of the AL Central than what we've got this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that could something that they could pull off and work, that would be an advantage to both teams. And but then because the Dodgers technically have two closers on their team already, and Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates. And so if they make a move like that, then neither one of them's probably worth a sack of groceries.
So explain to me why the people in Minnesota are fine, wonderful people.
Yeah.
Why the baseball team plays outdoors and the football team plays indoors. I don't get that. I don't understand it.
I don't either. And I don't get it at all, especially when you're trying to play baseball in Minnesota in April.
Or
and it's
October even.
October, yes. And it's amazing to me that more games up there haven't been snowed out or
Right.
rains hailed out or whatever else you want to call it up there. And it's a beautiful ballpark.
Yeah.
That's from what I can tell from watching it on TV and stuff. But yeah, that's one of the more interesting things. How the football team, and that was one of the things that the fans up there, when they played outdoors, was one of their calling cards. But then they put them indoors. But the baseball team's outdoors, so I don't get it at all.
You had the best home field advantage in football in Minnesota, like you do in Green Bay, right? Before they heated up the field, but you just did Bud Grant's Purple People Heaters, all of that good stuff, and then the baseball team, the Kirby Puckett teams, and just playing indoors, playing on that beautiful. I'm sorry. Was it plastic? What was in that outfield? Sort of like this. I don't know what you would call it, but
I don't know either. It looks kind of like a plastic garbage bag covered the whole stadium, kind of like Tampa.
But it was wonderful and beautiful, and they belong indoors in a dome for indoors. And baseball road tripper, please help us. We're not throwing any shade at all. I mean, I got my Twins jersey just hanging in the closet. Rod Carew, one of my favorite players of all time. He's a guy, great example. He is a Twin. He's not an Angel. He played a lot of time with the Angels. Yep. A lot of bases.
Well said.
But he'll forever be a Twin.
Yes, well said. Now I gotta ask. So we're talking about Seattle, a team that's been relative. The Dodgers are the team to beat. But on the other side of the spectrum here, the Utah Jazz, what is going on or what's not going on? The Utah Jazz unfortunately finished 17-65 last season in the NBA, 8-44 in their conference, so not a good look. So, any optimism on your end? Anything that you maybe expect to see this offseason, or just kind of, and then also kind of, I know it's kind of similar to our question with the Seahawks, but any kind of Jazz memories that you'd like to share along the way in terms of your fandom with the Utah Jazz?
Well, the Utah Jazz is the easy, explanation because I was born in Utah. And so, there was no one else besides them. And at a time when I didn't know any better, I was a fan of the Lakers, but Showtime and, Magic and Kareem and all that. And I was out of the state because I joined the Navy. So I was not in Utah, but all of a sudden I noticed, hey, there's this little team up there with John Stockton and Karl Malone, and they're winning basketball games. And I need to pay attention to that, and I did. And the greatest memory I have of them is John Stockton hitting a three to send them to the NBA Finals over the Houston Rockets, whom I despise with every fiber of my being. And because they, especially when Michael Jordan walked away, and it was the Houston Rockets both years that beat the Jazz in the playoffs that prevented them from possibly getting to the finals. And so I despise them to this day because, I recognize Hakeem Olajuwon as one of the great players that's ever played the game. I respect him awfully much. But Houston, that's the way I think about them. And but so when he hit that shot, that was the greatest memory ever. And of course, then we know that as far as the flu game, I've never bought that. And then when he hit the game-winning shot in Game 6, he pushed Brian Russell out of the way. We all know that's what happened. That wasn't called. If it was any other player, it would have been called offensive foul. And but it wasn't.
If you go to
people have said sour grapes to me for years because of that. But if you watch the replay, he pushed him.
Well, Kevin, you don't need for me to tell you this. I was watching the documentary just last night about the ref that took bribes and did some real terrible things, gambling.
That's right. That's right.
And that was all during that time. And he was very clear about the fact that they were told by the league certain people are allowed to do certain things. and they talked about specifically Michael Jordan on this one spin move they were told to stop clamping down on. They said, except for the stars like Michael Jordan, let them do these things. So there were 2 levels of calls. And yes, he got away with one huge. Anybody who doesn't think so, he's got the head in the sand, and they could, believe in the flat earth.
That's right. And I know that Michael Jordan, even years later when he went into the Hall of Fame, still referenced that. And he was, expressed anger and everything else. Well, you can do what you want, but it is what it is.
Right.
Yeah. Me personally, I think he got Paddington. Now, I have to ask. So one question. So all jokes aside for us. So I know on bellyupsports.com, I'm a big WWE guy as well. I know WWE's covered on there to some extent, but we're talking about Utah Jazz. I don't know if you were ever a wrestling fan but I pretty much watched it all from the WCW days, WWE, and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any remembrance of this moment, Hollywood Hulk Hogan and Karl Malone in the WCW main event ring? You remember that?
I do remember that as a curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I never really looked any further into that. And, because Karl Malone is one of those guys. He was a big, showman, of course, and he liked to be bigger than life and everything else. And but just like wrestling itself, that was just for play.
Yeah.
And, but it was fun.
Yeah.
I do remember
around
that
time they dipped their toe in the water with Dennis Rodman, I think with Jay Leno and the Kevin Eubanks. They had a lot of that was kind of going on back then to try to compete. But I've got to ask, you mentioned, obviously, I think one of your wheelhouses, of course, is fantasy sports. And so, that's something I haven't done the last few years, but I've done every single year. And I really got into it, but it really can consume you. So I would always try to set my lineup on a Monday, but then I would touch it every other day, and it would just get overwhelming. Did you ever get that call as a commissioner of a league at because I've been there, that 6:30 in the morning, ridiculous fantasy football question, hey, can I make a transaction as the waiver wire? I'm like, go to bed, buddy. It's 6:30 in the morning. This question will be there later. Do you ever have any stories like that where some people in the league, now obviously the online leagues, you don't know who they are and stuff, but an in-person league, do you ever have that guy that was just too much with that no boundaries?
Yeah, the thing that really gets me is when you have that guy and it's come to the point where he's or she's no longer competitive. And so what the maneuver is they drop everybody off their team. Everybody. Yeah. And that is, come on. Are we grown-ups or are we not? And that's happened in a couple of times. One time I was the commissioner, so I went right back on there and put everybody right back on their team, froze them out, and dropped them out of the league.
Love that.
We've got no time for any nonsense like that. And
I remember a year, and I mean, I have the right people, but I remember an example where it wasn't the whole team, but I remember having logged on, and I think we talked about this on one episode many, many months ago, but where some of the baseball leagues where you can only have minimum amount of individual pitching transactions that you're allowed for the week or for the season. And I remember one guy was so desperate to get a win in the Justin Verlander prime. He released Justin Verlander to get an Anthony Young kind of starter just to get an extra start. Someone who was 1-8 with a 7 ERA, thinking they didn't know any better, thinking, oh, I need those innings, I need those points. But now all of a sudden you put an all-star on the free agent wire. And so we had to kind of, reel that back in and stuff. But I was also thick-headed too, where I didn't pay, and I'm guilty of it. I remember the very first season, didn't pay attention. I didn't do anything that ridiculous, but didn't pay attention. And then I think it was August 1st or something, and I'm out of transactions for the season, and I'm stuck with who I had. Learned my lesson quick. So, but
I learned that early on because the leagues that I've been in don't have a season transaction or anything, but there is a weekly starting pitcher limit. And it was saying, you started 10 out of 12. I'm like, so what? Who cares? And then all of a sudden, everything was red. All the pitchers starters were all red, and I got absolutely nothing out of them. for the rest of the scoring period. So I learned that lesson. And that's one of the things that I try and tell people about. Make sure you know what your scoring, rules are. Make sure that you know what kind of league you're in. And so those kind of things don't happen to you. Because I was in the finals one year, and the guy I was playing did that, and he was locked out of his starting pitching the whole rest of the. And so I took him to town.
Good.
Right. And he deserved every bit of that. Is if you're in the playoffs, you should certainly know how things work by then. Mm-hmm. But so know your league. That's the main thing that I come up with from a strategy. When people ask, what is your strategy on fantasy? It doesn't matter what it is, football, basketball, whatever it is. Know your league.
Yes, know your league, and do what is the right fit. Like if you're someone who goes online and does a fantasy league, and 9 teams out of 11 are doing auto draft, and you're sitting there waiting for your pick, and then maybe an in-person draft is for you. That way you don't have to worry about things like that. But if we've all been there, we've done the in-person draft, 3 people don't show up for the draft, and now you're all of a sudden having to decide, do I pick someone else's team? There's all these decisions you have to make, of course. And I always liked one of the things I shared on the show before too is always liked certain oddball things like that were unique. Like I did a league once where we did pitching staffs instead of individual pitchers. With football, I never liked, I think it was PPR, right? Where I always wanted to value 7 as a receiver, let's say 7 receptions for 107 yards and a touchdown to me was more valuable than someone with 22 catches for 84 yards, and I've been in those leagues where, and I may not have it exactly right, but where, especially as a running back, they value how many times you've touched the ball and not so much. I would rather have 50 yards and 2 touchdowns than, 27 rushes for 100 yards or something with no touchdowns. So talk a little bit about that. And then in terms of your preference in those type of leagues, do you prefer the PPR? Do you like the other kinds, that sort of thing?
This is a subject that we just talked about on our fantasy football show the other day. What kind of leagues? And I've only done PPR since I've been involved in fantasy. And as I understand it, the PPR was created because before that it was standard in football, and running backs meant everything.
Yep. And
you could blow off the rest of your team pretty much. And so they came up with PPR to, get wide receivers and everything else more involved in it. And I know there's half PPR, which I've never dealt with that at all. I think they've done that to get even more involved, positions. And I really can't comment on too much on that. But PPRs, I think, is the way to go. And, you should be able to, give worth to somebody who does something like get you 2 touchdowns instead of a guy that rushes it for 27 times, like you mentioned, for 53 yards, isn't helping anybody. Yep. And so it's a bell. I talked about this as well. This is getting into math, which I suck at. And so I have to be really careful about what kind of, scoring that I'm getting involved in so I can understand it. Because I want easy to understand scoring.
So do I.
But you've got to give worth to where it belongs.
I get it. Now, I used to do a lot of fantasy. I don't do fantasy anymore just because I don't have the time to invest in it. But to your point, I remember the one year that I won in a pretty competitive league with friends. And I won based upon what you're talking about. I picked up. Somebody dropped this running back. He was a backup. And I forget his name. And he got me 4 touchdowns in one game for a total of 11 yards.
Yep.
True story. He was the typical old school fullback, 1 yard, a cloud of dust. He was a vampire. He would take other people's points. But before we move on, I want to just kind of digress a little bit, Kevin. 2 things. Baseball Road Trip asked a question. Kevin, do you have a hockey team? Seeing how LA has a couple choices, Utah and Seattle have new teams options. Do you have one? Because you have an eclectic group of favorites. And then I'll ask you a Jazz question.
Okay, so I'm in my own personal life, I've always liked Penguins
Oh, very
for
nice.
reasons probably I don't even understand. But because I like Penguins, I've always liked the Pittsburgh Penguins and Sid the Kid and all those guys like that. And then when they won back-to-back championships, and I've got a championship Penguin shirt in my lock back there and hanging and so I like the Penguins, and I know that Utah, as you mentioned, just got a team. I think the logo is outstanding.
So do I.
And I'm not too thrilled about Mammoth.
Right.
I think that they could have come up with something a little better than that.
Me too.
But it seems like the name is caught on, and that's what it's going to be. So I guess I better, get with the program with that one. I thought that when Seattle came in and named themselves the Seattle Kraken was one of the great names of all time.
Yeah, had to be.
And so Seattle hit that out of the park. Utah, I'm not convinced of. Like I said, I love the logo. I
would have loved Yeti, but Yeti wouldn't allow him to use the name.
That's right, and we've talked about that as well. Why would Yeti decide we're going to squash this? It's free publicity for you.
It's all money. They wanted more money, probably.
I'm sure that they did, but the publicity's got to mean something. I don't, get that. So I like my mom's, because last month was my birthday. My mom sent me a shirt. My brother sent me a Mammoth hat, so I got both of those things covered. But I'm not ready to sign off on Mammoth just yet.
No, I
don't blame you. And Emily says, yes, yes, Penguins. Yes, even Paddington loves Penguins. But
well, look at you, quick with the. You
are quick on the draw with that.
Yes, I love that.
But
I love
that Atlanta might be having a team as well. I think that's being discussed as an additional. Was it Atlanta? I believe it was there was an additional hockey team being discussed that would be.
They're discussing Atlanta for a third time. I mean, how many chances do you
get? Yeah. Right, and they pulled the teams out of there, and it's in Winnipeg now, and
and they had the Thrashers and they had the Flames. Right. Which Jim Craig played for about a minute. So I want to ask a Utah Jazz question, specifically sort of a prototype player that even to this day, I think every team needs. And that's, people talk about some of the greats of all time at Utah, and you mentioned a few of them in Stockton, but Jeff Hornacek was a wonderful, wonderful player. If you could talk a little bit about him and what he brought to the table.
Well, if you needed a 3-point shot, he was the man right there. And when I keep going back to the Navy, but I was in the Navy and stationed in Hawaii, and he came over there, Jeff Hornacek, and had a camp for kids, and that I went to just because I wanted. He's Jeff Hornacek. And so that was the kind of guy that he was, that he would put something like that together and have the kids come down and a bunch of counselors and everything like that, and helped out the kids. And so he's got a place, with me for, just for that. And of course, it wasn't like he was the small number 3 compared. Well, those are 2 Hall of Famers.
Right.
But Jeff Hornacek was a major part of that Utah Jazz team when they were getting, to the NBA Finals and everything. So I've always liked Jeff Hornacek, and he's a big, big, big part of that franchise.
Yeah, and mentions Atlanta is going to be out in the suburbs, richer areas. Yep. I think so.
Well, that seems like that's the thing, is all the teams are moving out to the suburbs. So that's what happened out here. Dallas Cowboys moved to the suburbs, and and stuff like that.
They're in Arlington. Yeah, but to your point, Kevin, I was in Utah a couple of years ago for business, for work, and I love the fact that they play right in the middle, right?
They do.
That's not too far from the temple. It's
that's
beautiful.
Right. Right now, and there was a 1999 when they had a tornado in Salt Lake City, and it hit the Delta Center.
Did it?
It did.
Wow.
And so that's an interesting piece of history, which I was overseas when it happened. And I got a USA Today, and it said tornado hit Salt Lake City. I'm like, what are you talking about?
It's so
and
strange.
my brother, because my whole family besides me and a sister live in Utah to this day.
Mhm.
And he was at the zoo in Salt Lake City with his kids when that happened.
Wow.
And but fortunately, he was well away from where, he left there and was like, how come nobody's moving? The traffic was all stopped and everything. But so, that's just one of the things that happened right there. So Delta Center does have some history. And
Oh yeah, I mean, and Mike, just to give you a reference, because I know Mike just recently went to a game in Cincinnati, and you know how you were able to walk from your hotel, literally.
Yeah.
You can do that. I stayed at one of the hotels right near the Fox television station. That's when I interviewed and spoke to the gentleman that owned Hall of Fame Wrestling. It was that same trip who passed away, and I was able to walk from my hotel to the arena and watch games. It was wonderful.
It's worth a little bit extra money to avoid
Yeah.
the parking fees and the traffic and all that stuff. It's the way to go. So I'm going to ask my final question, and Darren, if you have a final one to wrap that up, and this wasn't on our little notes and stuff like that, but I think it's a relevant question.
Okay.
I live here in Central Florida, so not far from Tampa. We just went this past Monday to a Rays A's game in the Battle of Teams Without a Stadium, and so we were there and had a fantastic time. It was awesome to see almost 11,000 packed Rays fans. I mean, people were standing everywhere. And Darren and I talked about this on some Rays episodes, but the ESPN and a lot of the talking heads on that channel and stuff, they don't give Tampa Bay enough due. Like, it's not what they make it out to be. Like, when you're there in the stadium, there's passionate Rays fans. It's like 85 to 90% Rays fans all over the place. They make it sound like nobody goes to these things and it's completely empty, and it's really not that bad. But the reason I bring it up is there's a very real possibility that they can make the playoffs this season. They're sitting there right now in the second wild card, and so that's a serious conundrum, I guess is the word, kerfuffle, as Darren likes to use. So wanted to ask both of you what your solution is to that. Obviously there's a couple ideas on the table. There's Atlanta, there's Miami, there's go ahead and just grin and bear it and play it there. It's not a lot of options. So what do you guys think on that? Because I'm intrigued to see what they're going to do with that.
Okay, I'll go. If I'm an executive with the Tampa Bay Rays, I think that I would talk to the players and see what they've got to, contribute, what their opinions are. And but I think that I would be the one that I would go to the league and tell them to pack sand, that this is Tampa Bay. We are playing the games here. If you don't like it, that's too bad, because it's not our fault that a hurricane blew our stadium down.
That's right.
And you want us to play our games wherever. Miami, like you said, doesn't matter. Unless the players say that they want, something different. I'm telling the league that, beat it. We're playing the games here, and that would be my solution.
And myself in the chat said amen. So
yeah, it's true. I can't add anything to that. I agree. They belong in Tampa. And we're going to talk about a different sport for a second, and that's hockey. Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, Stanley Cup winners, wonderful crowds.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about in football, Tampa Bay wins Super Bowls. Tampa Bay baseball, playoff team. That is a wonderful fan base, but it gets treated like garbage because the Major League, MLB, allows it to. I'm not a big fan of the commissioner of baseball, obviously.
I think you'd have to search far and wide to find somebody that is a fan of his.
Oh, I agree.
I think some sort of combination of, and I completely agree with you, Kevin. I think they got to find a way to make it work there. And if all they can do is pack 11 or 12,000, then so be it. And they could have watch parties all over the area. They could do something in the parking lot that they can come together and have a massive watch party out there. I think, yes, it's ideal. And I do see your point, Tony, in terms of highest bidder and moving them here and there and stuff. But I feel like there has to be that reward for, supporting your city, and like how awful, like you get to the promised land, just like we've talked about the commentators, they commentate all season long, they make the playoffs and then they go away, and then you don't see them anymore. And you're stuck with the Apple TV people and the
horrible.
So,
horrible.
So I'm in agreement with you, Kevin. I think that's the way to go. They find a way to make it work there. It does look,
yeah. I have my question I want to ask, but I just love this topic. You look at, for example, what the Athletics did in playing in Sacramento, and you could tell, like we talk about, they do the press conferences basically in a barn is the wrong word. It's just basically a storage facility. Tampa invested so much money to make Steinbrenner Field look like home, and it's a wonderful place to play. So yeah, in my opinion, they should be in Tampa and say, pound sand, we're staying here. But now I wanted to ask you, Kevin, I saw this wonderful documentary on the move from in 1957 from LA, from Brooklyn to LA, from Manhattan to San Francisco with the Dodgers and with the Giants. And I think about what happened with San Diego moving to LA in football. Now, granted, true, they did start in LA and then they ended it. Most people don't know that. And they went to San Diego, but San Diego was home. Much like people talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, by the way, Kansas City Chiefs started in Dallas.
They did.
People don't realize that. So, but
the Dallas Texans.
That's right. But people don't realize is, we've seen this before. How New York City allowed the Giants and the Dodgers to leave is ridiculous. How the heck did San Diego allow the Chargers to leave?
I don't get it, because the Padres used to play in the same place as the Chargers did.
Murphy Stadium.
Right. Murphy Stadium, I've been there. Mm-hmm. And somehow the Padres got it so that they could play in their downtown ballpark, which I've also been to. It is a fabulous ballpark.
I've been there too. It's beautiful.
Yep. And it's very beautiful. But how they could get that done, and they couldn't come up with a solution for the Chargers, and it's something I don't get. And it's been like that ever. We could use examples like how Houston Oilers can move to Tennessee, but yet somehow years later they find a way to put the Houston Texans right in that same city. And this has happened over and over and over throughout sports history. That like the Minnesota North Stars, beloved team up there, moved down to Dallas, become the Dallas Stars, and we've been to many of those games. Appreciate them being here.
Yep.
But so somehow Minnesota is able to put together something so they have the Minnesota Wild. Why couldn't they have done something to keep the team that was there already there? Agreed. And not have to do whatever it is they did to bring in the North Stars or the Wild, an expansion team? I've never got that.
So I have a follow-up question for you, Kevin. Different sport, since you kind of triggered me into something else.
Okay.
I am putting Kevin Wilson is now commissioner for life of MLB.
Okay.
Because he has the LA Dodgers in the background. I am putting you in charge of, can we have a real name for the Angels, please? California Angels, then there were the LA Angels, then the LA Angels of Anaheim. And stop
it, please. There was a time when I was in high school, I could walk and see Anaheim Stadium going to school and home. And so the Dodgers are my team, always have been, but I've always had a special place for the Angels as well, because I could see the stadium. I've been there. I've seen the Angels play when it was the Big A. Yep. And then after they did all the renovations, everything else after the Rams left. And so they are not the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim or any other form. They're not in Los Angeles. They
No,
played
they
there.
are not.
No, they played there. This is back before my time, even. When they played, because they started in Los Angeles. That's why they're the Angels in the first place.
Right.
But that was a very, very, very short period of time, and ever since then they've been in Anaheim. And if I'm Anaheim, I would be upset, and I know they've been. I've heard that they're upset that they blew off Anaheim.
Yep.
We support the team. The Dodgers couldn't give two hoots about the Angels, and so why they're doing. I know why they're doing it, because they give them some name recognition, because everybody knows where Los Angeles is. But everybody knows where Anaheim is too, because that's where Disneyland is.
I was going to ask. Yeah, I mean, literally, you could throw a rock from
literally
where the Angels play
you
to
can.
Disney.
I've been to both places. I know this. And so, if I'm the commissioner of baseball, this Los Angeles Angels gets stopped immediately.
Yep.
And they could either be the California Angels or they could be the Anaheim Angels.
Agreed.
Whichever one that you decide on, that's fine with me. But that's your only two options.
I so agree, Mike. He's right. Make some calls.
That's right. Let's get somebody on the horn and get this straightened out.
Yes.
I see Soupy actually mentioned that Angels are actually playing decent ball. So, yep, they definitely are. They're actually not too far out of the wild card there. So
that was my surprise team of the year. Just remember that.
Yep. That was. I remember.
If they could keep Mike Trout on the field, that would be awesome.
That's important. Yep. So, but Kevin, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate spending this time with you. And I've been following your stuff and checking out the website for a little bit of time now. But I'm glad that we were able to get you on, and we'll continue to support.
Anytime. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, continue to support you and all you do. And Darren, as always, it's a blast. So, guys, you'll want to make sure you're here with us this coming Sunday night, 8:00. We'll be live again. We'll let you know who we'll be live with in the upcoming days. But just want to say thank you all for continuing the support. Hit that like button, subscribe button, turn notifications on. And until next time, guys, we will see you around the ballpark.